Welcome to Business Spotlight on Money Radio WPSE. Business Spotlight is heard weekly at this time on 1450 AM and 107.1 FM. Today's guest is Gretchen Blough, Customs Brokerage Manager at Logistics Plus. Gretchen, thanks for joining us. What is your role with Logistics Plus, and what is your background in the industry?
Well, my background is I started with Logistics Plus as an intern back in 2006, I want to say. And there was an opening on site at one of our contracted positions. And Jim Berlin said, hey, I think you'd be really good at this because you started off in the IT department. And this is a bunch of IT and some legal stuff, and you'll get the legal stuff. So that's pretty much what happened. I went to work for one of our customers doing a duty drawback program, which involves pulling a lot of data for the imports and the export side, matching them together, and then turning it over to a drawback broker to apply for a refund with U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, I'll refer to them as that. And then ended up learning all the legal stuff that went along with it, all the customs regulations on importing into the U.S., and moved back to the station to Union Station, our corporate headquarters, when we started a compliance department, and learned a bit more about it. Did a lot of reading of the federal regulations, the classifications, and whatnot, and eventually took my customs brokerage test in 2014, got my customs brokerage license, and we started a customs brokerage division.
What does it take to become a licensed customs broker, and what does a licensed custom broker do?
Well, you have to take a test. I believe it's 4 hours, 70 questions. It's multiple choice. It's open book, which sounds really, really easy. But the book is 18 inches thick, at least. You need to learn the 10-digit classification for commodities that come into the U.S. There's 99% of all commodities that come into the U.S. have the 10-digit classification, which is called the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. The reason it's called Harmonized is the first 6 digits are supposed to be, in theory, harmonized among all the countries in the world, and then the last 4 digits are exclusive to the U.S. And so you have to be able to assign a classification to each commodity, and that's on the test. And basically, the classification determines the tariff or the duty rate. So it's very important to get it correct. What it is what it is. It's not, you can't shop around. In order to get an optimal duty rate, you have to classify it according to exactly what the commodity is. Once you pass the test, then you apply for your license. There's a big background check. There's an interview. I had to go to Cleveland to interview with CBP there because that's our home port. They do a background check with the FBI. You get fingerprinted. And then once you do that, if you're not working for an already established customs brokerage, then the customs brokerage has to test. So you have to first file entries in your home port. So everything that came into Cleveland or we routed into Cleveland, I would clear. Those are considered live entries because they're in your home port. But you're kind of limited to just clearing your home port because we do business all over the country. So what you need to do is get what's called remote location status, which is RLF status. I don't know why they have an F, but everything's done electronically. So then you test with your what's called your ACE team. ACE is the custom system for filing electronically. You test with your ACE team and go through and make sure everything that's coming into your home port is correct. And then they eventually grant you RLF status, and then you can file electronically in every port in the U.S.
You manage the Logistics Plus Custom Broker Solutions, or CBS for short. Can you tell me a little bit about how CBS is organized and what services you provide to your customers?
Well, we file entries for both customers that are utilizing our operations department, meaning that we route their shipment, LP routes their shipment, and we do it when they set up their own shipments. We can file on their entries on their behalf. When we file for our operations team, it's a really seamless process. The operations team lets me know 3 to 5 days before the shipment actually physically arrives, because we can file an entry before the shipment arrives. So then if I have any questions about what exactly the commodity is, so I can classify it, or there's something wrong with the paperwork, or any questions I have, I can push back to the ops team. They get with the customer. They make sure everything's in order. Then I file the entry electronically. All of our documents flow electronically from the ops team to me as well. And then I file the entry. I make sure it releases with customs, which means it's good to go. They're allowed to go in and pick it up, and then the ops team takes it from there. When we file independently when the customer set up their own shipment, the carrier, the forwarder, sends me all the information. I work with the customer, make sure everything's done properly, and then the other forwarder or carrier takes it from there, usually.
There's been a lot of publicity around the import tariffs implemented by this administration. What has happened with that, and what has changed?
Well, not only the last administration, but administrations prior to that, we've, as the U.S., have really had very low tariff rates. And, overseas too, those countries have had low tariff rates. The majority of the costs overseas when importing to another country overseas has been their VAT tax, which they use to support all their programs over there. Some countries in Europe have a 25% VAT tax. Here in the United States, we just have the tariff, the duty rate, and what's called MPF, which is just under a percentage point, which is the cost of customs processing an entry. The other charge we have, which again is under a percentage point, is HMF, which is harbor maintenance fee, is used to maintain the ports. So the duty rates have been relatively low. Generally speaking, most duty rates are 2.5% or under. We have a lot of stuff that even without a free trade agreement is duty free. Clothing, handbags, that type of stuff tends to have higher duty rates. But as a whole, our duty rates have been pretty low and pretty fair to importers, I guess you would say. They haven't been very protectionist. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, other people can debate. I won't get into that. But they have been pretty low all along. What has happened with this administration is, if we wanted to do this correction, in my opinion, it would be a little bit more gradual. What we're running into is with these 10, 30, 25% duty rates is that a lot of our customers, a lot of importers haven't been prepared because there hasn't been much notice. There's been a couple weeks notice, stuff is on the water. There's no turning an entire container ship back for someone who doesn't want to pay their duty. It's expensive to get it here, turn it around, that type of thing. We have a lot of customers that have been looking at foreign trade zones so that they can put it into a duty-free warehouse and then make a decision on what they want to do with it, whether they want to take it to another country or something like that. But foreign trade zones are getting very crowded, and it space is at a premium. It always has been at a premium, and it's very expensive to store goods there. So that's what we're kind of running into, people scrambling for a solution. So back in the beginning of the year, we had 30% duty go on washing machines and solar panels. We don't really have an importer that has washing machines at the import, but we do have a couple of customers that were greatly affected by the solar panels. A lot of the discussion prior to that was, it would only be for certain countries, so we'll plan on, importing them from country A rather than country B, and then all of the countries had the duty rate attached to it. So even with planning, they were kind of caught off guard. Then after that, we had the Section 232 tariffs with steel and aluminum, where it was 25% with steel and 10% with aluminum. We have a lot of local clients that were caught off guard with that as well. In fact, the ACE system, where we file all the entries through with CBP, they've been improving that for several years now. It's been a big major project with CBP. So there's lots of updates. Every weekend there's a huge update. So all these coders are putting together the updates that will allow greater flexibility in filing remotely and then filing for other government agency requirements like FDA and whatnot. So then on top of that, they have all these tariff updates added. And sometimes through no fault of their own, they try to mesh things together last minute, and then there's glitches in the system and things don't go as smoothly as they should, where we've had, some aluminum stuck for a week because the system couldn't actually process it with the scenario of how it was routed, which seems really silly. But when you think about all of the cogs that have to mesh to make this happen in customs system, that is a big deal. Then we've had the 301 tariffs. We've had 3 sections of that, 3 lists or tranches as they're called. We had one in, I want to say May, one in July, and one in September. Don't quote me on that because it's been a very busy year. But just various items from China that have, for the first and second tranche, they had 25%. For the third tranche, which is the biggest tranche by far, it's 10% duty with it jumping to 25% in January 1st, 2019. So that's made stuff really interesting as well, because there's been proposed lists every time that have been put up and for review. And then when they are final, they're a little bit different than the proposed one. So again, it's a little hard to plan, and there's only around 2 weeks notice as to what exactly the final list is. So we're running into a lot of people that have to scramble to make alternate plans for either sourcing or, do they want to limit what they're bringing in, that type of thing.
What are the implications for U.S. importers?
Well, as it turns out, there seems to be a lot that they don't have different sourcing choices. Their only choice is China. So they're passing the increased duty rate along to their customers. But, if they have an established contract with nothing in it, to take into account something like this happening, then their profits obviously would be a bit lower until they can make that adjustment.
It sounds like all of the recent tariff and coding changes have created a lot of confusion among importers and exporters. Has that created new opportunity for Logistics Plus?
I think it has. We have a lot of customers that come to us and ask us, hey, does that apply to mine? What can we do? We've talked to several law firms in D.C. in order to, there are exemptions that can be filed. If there's no other choice for the importer, they can file for an exemption from these tariffs. We haven't had anyone, it is a long process, so we haven't had anyone that has done that and been successful as of yet. But there are definitely ways that they can do that. And like I said, we've reached out to some attorneys in Washington in order to help them out, because there's a lot of law firms that are jumping on the bandwagon with this, and we wanted to be able to do a little bit of research and find law firms that were established in making these type of filings with the Department of Commerce, so that they can better and more efficiently process these for our customers. But like I said, there's alternatives there may be alternatives in sourcing. We can help. We have a supply chain solution division that can also do some research on their behalf to find maybe different sourcing opportunities. But yeah, a lot of it is in an advisory capacity. And, we can do that for people who aren't even our customers as of yet, because it is kind of hard to sort through all of this and get answers from some of the bigger customs brokerage firms.
Gretchen, are you hearing or seeing any direct impacts to industries occupied by Northwestern Pennsylvania area businesses?
Yes, mostly in the steel and the aluminum. But with the third tranche coming out, we're seeing, some machine parts and whatnot that were not included earlier in the year that are now on the list as well. So,
Gretchen, could you talk about any examples of situations where the Logistics Plus CBS team has helped importers navigate the new tariff changes?
Sure. I mean, we on an everyday basis, we have our customers come to us and say, well, what are HTS codes? Are they affected by the China tariffs? Can you and we definitely go through and review them and let them know. I mean, it's just been a general review like that and letting them know, and then they can look at their sourcing and look at what other opportunities they might have to go out and maybe maybe find something that there's no extra duty subject to that. And we've also gone through and reviewed their parts, because even though it's important to get the duty rate correct and the classification correct, sometimes there's like new technology that they've added to it that might change the classification a little bit. And another thing that they can do is they can apply for a binding ruling, which each port in the U.S. is kind of its own little, I always say its own little kingdom, where the port director gets to make a final decision on everything. If they get a binding ruling, that's at the national level, and then every port will have to abide by that binding ruling. And like I said, if new technology has been added to a part, it might change classification so that they can go in on the CBP website and they can upload specs and literature and whatnot, and then Customs can make the determination as to what the HTS code is. Customs is trying to get away from that whole every port's different mentality. They have the Centers for Expertise and Excellence, where these binding rulings are now reviewed by someone that specializes in those commodities, where you don't have a port director that's, classifying different kinds of fish, machine parts, and computer parts, and clothing. You have someone that specializes in, this is a machine part. So they have specialists in that now. So they don't have to have a little bit of knowledge about everything. They can specialize, which I think is a great way to be more efficient and have a better answer for importers. So,
Gretchen, looking at your crystal ball, do you have any idea how these tariffs will play out over the next couple years? And how do you keep up with all of these changes?
Well, a lot of reading, a lot of looking at the Federal Register, which is very dry reading. I always said I wanted a job where I got to read a lot, and I wanted something more in the lines of novels rather than federal regulations. But hey, you got to take what you can get. So there's a lot of people that have been in the industry a lot longer than I have. I talked to one drawback broker where he seems to think that maybe this will all go away, which I think is pretty optimistic. One thing that the customs system has been forcing us to do is, even with low value shipments, we can do what's called an informal entry, where the entry liquidates immediately, which means customs basically washes its hands of the entry. You can no longer adjust it. It just is what it is. A formal entry, you get a little less than a year to adjust the entry. Customs can, step in, change the classification, the valuation, that type of thing. The system has been forcing us to file everything as an informal entry, even when it's a low value shipment, which kind of leads me to believe there might be an adjustment, but I can't really predict that. And like I said, some people say this might go away, but it's hard to say. I couldn't predict all of this coming this year, so it's hard to predict it going away.
What makes Logistics Plus unique versus other freight forwarders and logistics companies that offer similar services as you do?
I think what makes us unique is that we take the time to talk to our customers and give them the peace of mind they need to make sure that, so that they know they're doing things correctly. A lot of the bigger customs brokers, they don't really explain why they're doing what they're doing. Anytime a customer calls and says, hey, this is the classification, can you explain it? Or this is the commodity. We work together with them in order to make sure we have the correct HTS code. It's a little bit more hands off with other brokers. They just do their thing, and the customer gets their 7501, which is the customs entry, and that's the end of it. And when they ask, well, why did I get this notice from customs? They don't get much of an explanation. We've had some customers say, hey, why did I get this notice from customs? My customs broker won't explain it to me. And I'll, sit down and talk to them about it and tell them why. And then I actually had one after I did that said, will you be my customs broker now? So, I think that's the big value add that we offer to our customers. We just get to know their products. We get to, know them, that we get to know how they want things routed and whatnot. And we really tailor things to them, but we give them the peace of mind that things are being done correctly, that hopefully they won't be getting a notice from customs with us. But, we just give them the better knowledge, because it's supposed to be informed compliance. And they can do all the research they want, but if it's not clicking with them, they need to talk to someone like us. There's a reason that we have to know an 18-inch book in order to take the exam. So that's what we're here for. We're here to help our customers.
Gretchen, as you said earlier, you've been with Logistics Plus for many years now. What's that been like?
When I first started, only part of the third floor of Union Station was full, and I was on site at GE, and that, when we had our other offices out there and everything, and now we have 2 floors of Union Station that are just packed, and more offices, both here in the U.S. and abroad, and it's just been crazy. But the cool part is that I got to build my own opportunity here. Like I said, I started out in the IT department, got into compliance first, and then took my customs brokerage exam, and we started a whole new division. So you can't say that about most companies where you can grow your own opportunity like that.
As we've talked about frequently here on Business Spotlight, Logistics Plus has seen a lot of growth over the past few years. Do you think this is sustainable?
Well, I think what we've had lately has been exceptional, but I think there's still room for growth. One thing that we see a lot is that we have customers that, like the individual managers or whatnot, leave and go to another customer, and they drag us along with them. So that's always cool that they were so impressed with us at their former company that they bring us to the new company. So it's all been a lot of word of mouth, which is just weird in this day and age, but it has been word of mouth, and I think that really speaks highly of us, that we make people happy and do a good job, that they take us new places. They're not, afraid to introduce us to their new job.
The going the extra mile for your clients makes a difference, doesn't it?
Right, exactly. There's a lot of cookie cutter type companies out there where you have to do all the work. It's kind of like using the self-checkout, and that's no fun. And, I always say, well, if I have to use the self-checkout, I want an employee discount, but you don't have to use a self-checkout here. You're helped every step of the way, whether it's the routing, the customs, importing, exporting, it doesn't matter. You're helped every step of the way.
Gretchen, what would you advise someone who is interested in learning more about the import, export, or global compliance side of things?
They can email our team at C as in cat, B as in boy, S @logisticsplus.net. And any questions you have, just let us know and we'll get back to you.
If someone had any questions about what we've talked about today, Gretchen, where could they go?
Again, the same email, or my number is 814-461-7630.
And Gretchen, any final thoughts you'd like to add?
One thing that the 232 and the 301 tariffs, you might have heard in the news, it's about Homeland Security, that type of thing. I did some reading up on that, and the logic behind that, I guess, is the fact that there's been a lot of industrial espionage, reverse engineering done by China to copy our products, and that's where you get the Homeland Security part of it in there, which I found interesting once I started looking into it, because I didn't grasp that right away. So that's about it. That's all I can think of.
Thanks for listening to Business Spotlight on Money Radio WPSE. Business Spotlight is heard Fridays at noon. Join us again next week as Dr. Ford is in the Business Spotlight.